who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications, with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared.
He was heard, means God heard his prayers.
It is reported in the Gospels that Jesus prayed to be saved from the cup of crucifixion in Mark, Matthew, and Luke. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 39, it says, "Going a little farther, he threw himself down with his face to the ground and prayed, 'My Father, if possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will.'" In this prayer, no less than 3 times did he ask God to be spared from being crucified, but yet as a true submitter to God, he left it in the hands of God by saying, "Not my will, but your will be done." Muslims maintain that God had accepted the request of his beloved Messiah, as it is attributed to Jesus in John chapter 11 that God always accepts his prayers. Also, another passage in the New Testament confirms that Jesus' prayer was accepted by God, and pleadings with a loud cry and tears to the one who could rescue him from death, and God heard his prayers because of his deep reverence for God. Raymond Brown, in his monumental book entitled Death of the Messiah, on page 228, mentions that Hebrews 5:7 was an early Christian hymn with its wording clearly based on Psalms 116. Amazingly, when one goes to Psalms 116, one realizes that it is about someone who praises God for answering his prayers and delivering him from a close encounter with death. Psalms 116. "I love the Lord because he heard my plea for mercy and listened to me. As long as I live, I will call to him when I need help. The ropes of death tightened around me." Verse 6. "I was in serious trouble and he delivered me." Yeshua is in the Hebrew. Verse 13 has the name Yeshua in it. Any Jewish Christian who followed Jesus would see clear-cut allusions to the name of the Messiah in the text. Verse 16, "Yes, Lord, I am indeed your servant. I am your lowest slave. You save me from death."
I am asking the Englishman, please, sir, tell me in your language.
You save me from death. You save me from death.
And you people taught me English. You people taught me English. So I'm asking the Englishman in your language.
You save me from death. You save me from death.
I'm asking, is that English? And yet this same nation, he's reading the book in his own mother tongue and is understanding the exact opposite of what you're reading.
You save me from death.
I'm asking, is that English? Exact opposite, exact opposite, exact opposite. La 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 la
la la la la. This can be seen very clearly when we look at one of the key texts that was presented to us, and that is Hebrews 5:7. I've always been surprised when my Muslim friends go to the book of Hebrews, because the central argument of the book of Hebrews is all about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and his being the high priest who gives his life if you think that the writer to the Hebrews was in any way saying that Jesus does not, he goes into the holy place carrying his own blood, for crying out loud. It's so clear. It's the essence of the entire argument of the book of Hebrews. So to take one of the verses and say, well, what he's actually saying is that Jesus wasn't crucified, is really to completely miss the point of the book of Hebrews. So we have in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7, the assertion, we have the assertion in Hebrews 5:7, he offered up, in the days of his flesh, he offered up both prayers and supplications with loud crying and tears to the one able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his piety. Oh, he didn't die. Well, what is death? What is death? In the understanding, the separation from God, Jesus was saved from death. How? The resurrection.
I'm asking, what language are you speaking?
Jesus was saved from death. How? The resurrection.
I'm asking, is that English?
Jesus was saved from death. How? The resurrection.
By God, it is gibberish, it's not English.
That's the writer of the Hebrews understanding. Listen to the writer of the Hebrews. If you want to see how consistent this is, I did 80 sermons through the book of Hebrews just a couple of years ago. You can go listen to them. You can walk all the way through from the beginning, which talks all about the deity of Christ being the creator, all that kind of stuff. That's what the writer of the Hebrews believes, who is heavily influenced by Paul. All the way through the rest of his writing, and it is a consistent testimony all the way through. So the only way to understand Hebrews 5:7, if you're going to honor the context from which it's taken, is that he has been saved by resurrection. He was heard because of his piety. And so when we have these, well, the psalmist said this. Well, the psalmist is always going to be a small picture, not the great fulfillment. Unless you accept the idea that the fulfillment cannot be greater than the small picture, then none of that argumentation made any sense at all.
Then Hebrews chapter 5 verse number 7 is clear. That's why Bart Ehrman in his book Orthodox Corruption of Scripture mentions that scholars such as Alphonse von Harnack, they added the word not into the text, that his prayer was not heard. And Rudolf Bultmann, one of the greatest Christian commentators of modern times, he died actually a few decades back, he agreed with this emendation because they know what Hebrews 5:7 actually means. The plain reading of the text is Jesus' prayers were answered. Now, if that contradicts the rest of Hebrews, well, that's nothing new. Nearly every book of the Bible contradicts itself.
So the only way to understand Hebrews 5:7, if you're going to honor the context from which it's taken, is that he has been saved by resurrection.
I'm asking, what language are you speaking? What language are you speaking? Context.
Of whom we have many things to say, and hard to be uttered, seeing ye are dull of hearing. For when for the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk, and not of strong meat. For every one that useth milk is unskilful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil.
We must remember that Jesus prayed to be saved from the cross in the first place. He prayed to not have to die on the cross. So his prayer being heard means being spared crucifixion, not dying on the cross and then being raised. He wanted to be spared the whole ordeal of having to die in the first place on the cross.
So to take one of the verses and say, well, what he's actually saying is that Jesus wasn't crucified, is really to completely miss the point of the book of Hebrews.
The plain reading of the text is Jesus' prayers were answered. Now if that contradicts the rest of Hebrews, well, that's nothing new. Nearly every book of the Bible contradicts itself. You saved me from death.
Means God heard, means God heard, means God heard his prayers.
لقد كفر الذين قالوا إن الله هو المسيح ابن مريم وقال المسيح يا بني إسرائيل اعبدوا الله ربي وربكم إنه من يشرك بالله فقد حرم الله عليه الجنة ومأواه النار وما للظالمين من أنصار.
سبحان الله والحمد لله والله أكبر.